Welcome back to another episode of Bible Conversations. Today we're going to be continuing the series of characters in Proverbs and talking about the glutton. Alright, so the glutton. This is something that almost immediately when you mention that or when you bring that up, people are going to think about food, right? Mm-hmm. That's what gluttony is almost always thought about. Whenever it's brought up, it's probably honestly why it's not preached about a whole lot is because we live in America where we like to go...
gluttonous.
Yeah. Well, honestly, be gluttonous. If you want to be blunt about it, you're right. But I was going to put it a little bit nicer and say we just like to go over and above what is needed. Honestly,
we have created buffets here in America.
Oh yeah, well, and even restaurants that aren't necessarily known as buffets serve buffet amounts of food. Like it's ridiculous. And Paul told us to buffet our bodies, right? So isn't that where we get that from?
Maybe.
No, but. We mentioned this, I believe, last week when we're talking about gluttony. It's so much more than just the food that we take in, the amount that we choose to eat at certain times. It's really similar to fasting in that way. Is when we think about fasting, obviously our initial thoughts go to food. We fast from food. We remove that so we can focus on godliness. But fasting is so much more than just food. You can fast from all sorts of things for the purpose of prayer, for the purpose of being in the scripture, reading it. There's so many more applications to fasting. Same thing with gluttony. Obviously, the first thought is food, but there's so many more things that we have to apply to our lives, so many more things that we have to understand about gluttony in order to really, I guess, rein it in, for lack of a better phrase, and keep it in check. So,
yeah. Well, so as you mentioned, the idea of gluttony typically does revolve around food, but there's two definitions I've got that one covers that and the other one covers something different.
Okay.
So one, given habitually to greedy and voracious eating or drinking, right? So in other words, you're just constantly shoving things through your gullet, right?
Okay.
Like it's just that's one of them. And the other is that it's someone or one that has a great capacity for accepting or enduring something. In other words, a glutton for punishment.
Okay.
And so the word glutton itself, this is just a side little fun note. The word glutton itself actually comes from the Latin word gulo.
That's fun to say.
It is fun to say. And what it means in English is wolverine. So the animal, the wolverine, not the comic book character, although he is certainly a glutton for punishment, and the name Wolverine fits. But Wolverine, the animal, is known as glutton. And another name, my favorite name for the Wolverine is skunk bear. So,
all right.
just an interesting little tidbit about kind of the origin of the name, but it is Latin in root, where we get it from. And so, does
like the animal itself, like the Wolverine animal, does it have characteristics for why it has that name?
I looked that up and I couldn't really. I'll look it up again and see if I can figure it out.
That's curious to me. Like whenever they named it, hey, we should name it Glutton. Understanding what glutton means, if it's personality, the personality of that animal, is gluttonous, you know? That'd be interesting.
Yeah, so it's the largest member of the weasel family.
Yeah.
31 to 44 inches, so it's about like 3 feet long, weighs 40 pounds. I'll keep looking, but so the diet, it's a carnivore, an opportunistic scavenger, and frequently eats carrion from other animals' kills. It says it's very strong for its size, and its prey, get this, a weasel, basically, right? A large weasel. Mm-hmm. Its prey can include deer, moose, wild sheep, and elk.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
It eats eggs, roots, and berries. It apparently is really quick and run up to 30 miles an hour. So it's almost as fast as I used to be. And then it stores up food for later. So, I mean, it doesn't seem like it has that. So I don't know exactly why it is named that. But anyway, there's
interesting
all sorts of information about the Wolverine or the gulo, the glutton.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's get to the Proverbs here.
Well, real quick before you do that,
go
I was going to say, just like the second definition that you had there, it's a matter of what'd you say, like going above and beyond.
Great capacity for accepting or enduring something.
Yeah, great capacity, and what I want to focus on is like accepting something. And a lot of times when we use that word enduring, it's in a good sense. We are to endure as Christians. We're to endure the struggles that come in this life, and we're to go through that and endure that. And so that's not in the bad sense of being a glutton, enduring too much. That's never going to apply. But it's a matter of accepting too much. It's a matter of enduring. I don't know. It's kind of like you're not going to kick back against sin. You know, you're going to continue to say, oh, well, I messed up again. I'm going to continue to endure it. A lot of times people will use the phrase, well, this is just my cross to carry. This is the problem that I have been tasked with. And I think that sometimes is when we can become gluttonous in that way. As far as enduring to the point of, okay, you gotta kick back against that sin. You've got to grow. You've got to turn away from it. So, anyways, you had Proverbs you wanted to take us to.
Yeah. So Proverbs 23, 19 through 21 it says, "Hear, my son, and be wise, and direct your heart in the way. Be not among drunkards, or among gluttonous eaters of meat, where the drunkard and the glutton will come to poverty, and slumber will clothe them with rags." So, we talked about this I think it was 2 weeks ago when we talked about the drunkard. But the drunkard here is looped in with this gluttonous eater, right? This individual who is continuously, as habitually, as consistently eating way too much.
Yeah.
And what it reminds me of, when I think of glutton, I think of food initially. Having taught a Bible class on it, I then start thinking of, what else does it apply to, which is almost everything in life, to be honest. You can be a gluttonous reader. You can read too much and not spend enough time with your family. You can spend too much time in front of a TV.
Yeah.
You can spend too much time working. You can spend too much time doing all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Because gluttony
is a glutton for technology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's simply someone who is overindulging in something.
Yeah.
And so what I think of is the movie Super Size Me. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
So it's by Morgan Spurlock. And this guy, he spent 30 days and he only went to one location. He only went to McDonald's. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner, all at McDonald's. And if they asked him, do you want to supersize the meal, he had to say yes. And he had to eat all of it. They only ask like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah. But these rules that he's given himself.
These rules he's given himself to see what was going on. Well, within a month, he gained 25 pounds.
Yeah.
That's 30
days.
And
if I remember right, his doctor was like, you've got to stop.
You're
going to die.
Yeah, within 20 days, so 21 days, his doctor was like, cut it out.
Yeah.
You need to stop because you will die. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's very much not healthy. It's not okay to do. And obviously I don't know very many people that do that, right? They go to McDonald's or any fast food restaurant for that matter.
For 3 meals a day.
For 3 meals a day, and that's all that they eat, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is that we do overindulge in food in America. We do overindulge in leisure. We do overindulge in just about everything that is not the Bible.
Yeah. Well, we even overindulge in money, honestly. Yeah. The pursuit of and the constant chasing after just financial wealth. There's all kinds of things that you can look at and see that it's almost like the personality of an American is to not be satisfied with fill in the blank. Honestly, anything. food included, but there's all kinds of things that it's like, I need more. I'm constantly searching. I'm looking for more. I'm looking for the next thing. I think even Proverbs talks about this in regards to drunkards. They will, like crash and then the next day rise and say, when can I have my next drink? I don't recall the exact proverb that is. But that's kind of what we see with more than just drinking, more than just overeating, in that gluttonous way. It's a constant, not, how do I phrase this? It's a sense of not being satisfied with whatever we have.
And because we're not satisfied, we do something about it. Right?
Yeah.
So what then is the solution? I think we've made it pretty clear what gluttony is about. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's about food. And yes, it's about everything else too, right? It's about what we are choosing to consume. And we consume media. We consume entertainment. Get on our phone, right? I asked some kids the other day, how often do you spend on your phone? And, I told them I think my weekly report comes in and like my daily thing is like 4 hours. And I think that's a lot, right? But I use my phone for work too. Like it's not just, and they laughed. They were like, wow, that's so little. And I was like, how much time are you guys spending on your phone, right? So we consume these things and the solution, self-control. Mm-hmm. The only solution to this, which is also a fruit of the Spirit, right? Galatians 5. But it's self-control. So Proverbs 20, if I can read my handwriting, 25, I believe, 28. It says, a man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. What city do you think of immediately? A city that is broken into and left without walls.
Jerusalem, when the Israelites were taken off to be captive.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. So I think of Jericho.
Okay.
And I think both of those lay out the point really, really well.
Yeah.
Right? Both cities were destroyed.
Yeah.
Both cities were laid waste. Both
my second answer to that was the Alamo.
The Alamo.
Because you have to remember the Alamo.
You do have to remember the Alamo.
Keep going. Sorry.
That hurt my heart a little bit. But no, both cities were laid waste, right? And then they were plundered.
Yeah.
And so the idea there being that a man without self-control is like Jericho.
Yeah.
And when you're not able to control yourself, when you're not able to take care of yourself, when you're not able to do these things that you ought to be doing, well, your walls are going to get broken down. Your defenses are going to be destroyed.
Yeah.
And you're rife.
You're left
and ready
helpless.
You're left helpless. You're ready to be plundered.
Yeah.
And who's going to do the plundering?
Satan. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is I think sometimes we don't give Satan enough credit for how he works and how deceitful he truly is.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a bad way to phrase it. Give him credit for doing something evil, but it's.
Well, in one sense, we have to give him credit.
Yeah.
If we don't give him credit, then we diminish what he can do.
And that's what I mean by that is being aware of what he can do.
It's not it's not saying, "Hey, Satan, good job." It's being aware of what he does.
Exactly. Being aware of how deceitful he is.
Yeah.
Because we don't always think of an overabundance of media. We don't think of an overabundance of food. We don't think of an overabundance of entertainment, an overabundance of work as something that's inherently bad.
Yeah.
But Satan has twisted the thought process of so many to think that way so that when our defenses are broken down, he can start plundering our hearts.
Yeah.
His main goal is to just take as many people as he can away from God.
Yeah.
I heard a quote one time, and I think I've even brought it up here on the podcast before, that Satan, he doesn't love you. He doesn't care about you one lick.
Nope.
He hates God, though.
Yeah.
And God loves you. And so if he can steal you from God, that's his only objective.
Yeah.
And so he does so many things to distract us from our relationship with God, to distract us from our love from God. And the more things that he can throw in our lives, the more things that he can create us to be busy with, he can cause us to be busy with, then he's succeeding at his job of pulling us away from God.
Yeah. So I've got 3 verses from the New Testament.
Okay.
That I want to go over. I don't know how many you've got, or if
I've almost got more of like a long passage that I want to look at between Philippians 3 and 4.
Sweet. So I've got 3. So let's go over to 1 Corinthians chapter 10.
Okay.
And we'll go to verse 13 here. And it's just a short one. And it says, no temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability, but with the temptation he will also provide the way of escape, that you may be able to endure it. And so the idea here being, that, well, we're tempted to be gluttonous. We're tempted to consume all these things. We're tempted to take part in this, but we have been promised that there is no temptation that can overtake you without your consent, right? And that really is the bottom line, is we have to give into that temptation. Yeah. We have to allow ourselves to be led by that temptation. Yeah. And oftentimes those temptations, if they start to take hold, it's not just a one-time thing. It's a step by step, and you gotta make choice after choice after choice after choice.
Yeah, well, and that's the passage. I believe it's in Romans chapter 8. Nothing can separate us from the love of God. Yeah. There's no outside force that can cause you to be separated from God unless you make that decision yourself. All of these temptations are going to be coming your way, but they can't force you. They can't cause you to do anything outside of your control. You still have control over whether you give into those temptations or whether you slam the door on them.
Exactly. Yeah. So the second one I've got is from 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. And we'll start in verse 6. This is Paul writing to Timothy, and he says, "For this reason, I remind you to fan to flame the gift of God, which is in you through the laying on of my hands." So in other words, Timothy has this great gift, right? But then he says in verse 7, "For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control." And so then the Spirit of God then assists us where we might fail. Yeah. The Spirit is able to step in and work through us, work through our conscience, work through however it is that the Spirit works and say, stop. Yeah. No. Don't go further, right? Maybe you've taken that first step. Don't go further. And so it's up to you then as the individual to heed the Spirit there. Yeah. To pay attention to it. We all sin. We all fall short of the glory of God. We all face those temptations. And at some point or another, we all give in a little bit to those temptations. But are we going to fully give in? Are we going to allow those temptations to overtake us? Mm-hmm. And I think that right there is the reality. We have to address the reality that we're going to fall. Yeah. But how far are we going to fall? At what point are we going to say enough is enough? And I think Paul here is saying, listen, the Spirit of God that resides in you, the Spirit of God that resides in us today is a spirit of power and of love and of self-control.
Yeah. Whenever we're talking about the Spirit, one of the places that I like to go, talking about His power and what He can do for us. I love the verse there in 2 Timothy that He's there to support us as we strive to be better in our self-control. But how much does He support us? How powerful is He? I always take folks to Ephesians chapter 3, verses 14 through 21, just like the end of that chapter there. But in verse 20, "Now to Him who is able to do far more abundantly than all that we ask or think, according to the power at work within us." You just talked about that power, that Spirit that is at work within us. Yeah. And it's incredible to think that He's able to accomplish, not by my power, but by His own power, far more abundantly than anything I could even ask or think about, anything I could imagine. Yeah. But it's a matter of, am I allowing God to work in my life, or am I trying to remain in control myself? Yeah. That's the balancing act with self-control, is you are in control and you have to turn away from sin and from evil, while at the same time surrendering control over to God.
Yeah. It's a hard thing to do. Yeah. And part of being a Christian, it's hard. Yeah. I think the world, America, really has portrayed this picture of Christianity as easy. You go to church on Sundays, you give a little bit of money maybe, and that's it, right? And I'm talking about Christendom in general, not the church. Yeah. Right.
I saw a trailer for a new Christian movie that's coming out in 2023, and I don't remember the name of it, but it's set back in, I want to say the 70s or something. Yeah. And basically the point of the the movie is that like there's this old church, it's dying, they're not welcoming to people of different cultures, people that look differently, people that talk differently. And basically what happens is the quote pastor of this congregation has a change of heart and is incredibly welcoming to the like hippies of the 70s, and actually like becomes this like mega church that grows from that. But you could even pick up just even in the trailer that it's not a matter of let's get better, let's grow, let's conquer sin, let's surrender our lives to God. Instead, it's this is a place you will be loved.
Yeah.
Period. Now, that's an awesome opening statement, but it has to follow with this is a place where you will be loved as you strive to grow.
Yeah. So we're going over Ezra right now in Sunday morning Bible class. And one of the things that has struck me about Ezra is the desire that these Jews have to rebuild the temple, to serve God. So chapter 4, basically you've got, we'll start in chapter 1. And I'm not reading through all of it. It's going to be a very short explanation, right? But Cyrus, who is king of Persia, gives a proclamation that the Israelites are able to go back to Jerusalem and they're going to rebuild the temple, right? So they start going back, and chapter 2 is all of the exiles. It's listed, and there's about 50,000 people that go. Well, it's been about 70 years, at this point about 50 years, since they were taken up out of Jerusalem. And the people that are going back, there is absolutely no way, it's literally impossible for all 50,000 of those people to be over the age of 50. So you've got people who are returning to Jerusalem
who have never seen
Jerusalem. Have never been to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So they're not really returning, they're going. Then why are they going? What's the purpose of them? What's to rebuild the temple of God so that they might worship God, right? So they do that. They go back, they start rebuilding the temple, and you've got some people in the surrounding regions who are like, hey, we worship your God too. Can we help? And they're like, no, we're not letting you help. There comes a point where cooperation is not just cooperation anymore. It becomes a matter of you are accepting of their beliefs. You are giving in their beliefs. And it's one thing, and I mentioned this in the college and 20-somethings Bible class, right? It's one thing for us as individuals to have friends that are of different faiths, different denominations, and we are not a denomination, but you understand what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
To have people that are friends that have and share different beliefs. We should be doing that. But why does the Keller Church of Christ itself not go and do something with, let's say, Keystone right down the road? Why do we not do something with them? Well, because our cooperation would then become a matter of, well, we obviously agree with what you're doing, and we agree with what you teach. And so Ezra and Ezra wasn't there at this point, but the Jews, they were unwilling to sacrifice and to give up God's commandments and God's desire and His will. And so they said, no, we're not getting help. Well, those people opposed them. It got delayed. Another 20 years or so, they rebuild it again. Haggai and Zechariah, and you can read through Haggai and Zechariah and their prophecies. And Haggai is very straightforward, like, guys, you're building your own houses. Rebuild the temple.
Yeah.
And Zechariah is like, all right, so I've got a vision from God, and it's wonderful and amazing, and I want you to hear it because you got to build, right? Like it's very more uplifting and positive, and and so I find it so interesting that the people, the Israelites, and they went through just like we do, right? They went through periods of history where they were all gung-ho for God. And then they went through periods of history where it was like, well, I mean, okay. Like, I guess we can burn incense. You know, like it was just kind of And
which is interesting. You can look at our history, even just over the past 100 years, and see similar things.
Yes.
It's funny how history repeats itself when you start looking at it in that way. Even all the way back to the BC, but like before Christ was around, like these days where the Israelites are in captivity, you can see these cycles of generations that go through, and how history genuinely repeats itself, and religiously speaking, I mean, history repeats itself in all sorts of ways, but even just spiritually and religiously speaking, there are waves of generations on fire and waves of generations that could care less, and it comes and goes.
It does. And part of that is because there's not a focus. Joshua 1:9, one of my favorite verses, right? Meditate on this word day and night. It's because there's not a focus on what there needs to be a focus on.
Yeah.
And 2 Peter chapter 1, starting in verse 3, and we've talked about power a little bit, right? And so it starts off, his divine power has granted to us all things that pertain to life and godliness through the knowledge of him who called us to his own glory and excellence, by which he has granted to us his precious and very great promises, so that through them you may become partakers of the divine nature, having escaped from the corruption that is in the world because of sinful desire. All right, so all that is great, and that's really important. We don't have time to dig into all that. But the bottom line is that through the power of God, through his Son, through the Spirit, we are able to escape from the corruption and the sin of the world, right? And then in verse 5, he says, because of all that, because of the grace you've been given, because of this opportunity, for this very reason, make every effort to supplement your faith with virtue, and virtue with knowledge, and knowledge with self-control, and self-control with steadfastness, and steadfastness with godliness, and godliness with brotherly affection, and brotherly affection with love. For if these qualities are yours and are increasing, they keep you from being ineffective or unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. For whoever lacks these qualities is so nearsighted that he is blind, having forgotten that he was cleansed from his former sins. All of those things, they are to build upon one another, and self-control is kind of in the middle there, right? And it comes after knowledge. When you understand, and we're speaking about gluttony, right? When you understand that you are being gluttonous in your behavior, when you come to that knowledge, you must do something about it.
Or not even, like, to phrase it a little bit differently, not even just to understand that you are being gluttonous, but when you understand that there are things that could cause you to be gluttonous, or there are moments where you have faltered in that and have allowed something to cause you to be gluttonous for a time. It's a matter of being aware and understanding, so you can avoid, so you can employ self-control. And so, sometimes when we get to talking about stuff like this, and it's like, it's through a lot of stuff that we talk about, what we preach about. There's times where we just paint with broad brushes and say, we've got to just avoid all moments like this. We've got to completely turn around. Sometimes it's I know that you're currently struggling with this and that you've had times where you falter, but we've got to be more aware. We've got to make sure that, like, even if it's not something that you falter with every day, if it's not every single day you're being gluttonous with the entertainment, with the use of technology, if it's last week this happened, are you more aware of that now?
Well, and that's Paul's wearing the armor of God, right? Like, you have to put, you don't just, like, armor doesn't just attach itself to you, right? We're not Iron Man, right? Like, you can't just walk over and then all of a sudden, boom, you got armor on. We're talking, you've got to put the helmet on. You've got to put the breastplate on. And that's an intensive process. And in order to do so, you have to be aware of what
an intentional process.
Yes, and very intentional. And you got to know why are you putting that armor on? Well, because it's dangerous out there, right? So we certainly have to be aware, and we have to be consistently aware. We can't let our guard down. And ultimately, if we do let our guard down, verse 9 is going to be our description, right? For whoever lacks these qualities is so nearsighted that he is blind, having forgotten that he was cleansed from his former sins. And I don't want to be categorized as that. I don't want to be classified as that. I don't want to be Man, that Chris Carrillo guy, he's blind.
Yeah. Well, or even as being described as a liar, that's what 1 John is talking about. If we say that we're walking in the light while we live something completely different, then we're lying. We're deceiving ourselves. I had one more place that I wanted to take folks before we close this out, but I'll make it really fast because I know we're kind of running short on time. But in Philippians chapter 3 and 4, this is what I want to draw y'all's attention to, mainly verse 12 through 16 of chapter 3. And Paul kind of keeps the same thoughts the whole way, but there's just two paragraphs that I think he makes it very clear what he's talking about through these last two chapters as a whole. But Philippians 3, 12 through 16, and then also Philippians 4, 10 through 13. Okay. And the way that I like to describe these two paragraphs, but really these two chapters as a whole, is Paul is encouraging every Christian to be content but not satisfied. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is that we need to be content in things of this world, but not satisfied in things spiritually speaking.
Yeah.
And we've really almost flipped that on its head. There's so many times where we think, I'm content with where I'm at in my relationship with Christ. I'm content with how I am turning away from temptation, how I am slamming the door on Satan as he's crouching there trying to devour me. I'm content in the active faith that I have in my life. Yeah. There's so many times where we say or even subconsciously feel this sense of being content, spiritually speaking, but we're never satisfied with things physically. And Paul completely says the opposite of that. He says in chapter 3, verses 12 through 16, that we cannot be satisfied with our relationship with Christ. We cannot be satisfied with this race that we're running. He says in verse 14, I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call. And he even goes a step further and says, let those of us who are mature think in this way. Yeah. In other words, if you are not thinking in this way, that I can never be satisfied in my relationship with Christ, I can never be satisfied in my race that I'm running, then you have not matured yet, spiritually speaking. Yeah. And on the flip side of that, in verse 10 through 13 of chapter 4, he's saying that in terms of things physically, I'm content. Yeah. I have all I need. I've learned the secret to being content, whether I'm well fed or whether I'm hungry, whether I have an abundance of things or whether I am in need, in any and every circumstance is the way he phrases it in verse 12. And the secret to that, the secret to being content in everything, is that Christ strengthens me. Yeah. That I know where my, sense of belonging lies. I know what gives me what gives me satisfaction in this life is that I'm serving him. Yeah, it's where my treasure is. And Jesus even talked about that. John 4, talking with the woman at the well, talking about living water. John 8, he is the bread of life. Yeah. Water and food, the two things that we absolutely must have in order to live. And Jesus says, I am that. I'm going to be what satisfies you. I'm going to be what carries you on. And so we have to make sure that we're not flipping it around and saying, I'm content spiritually, but I'm not satisfied with physical things. Instead, I am satisfied with physical things, but I'm not spiritually speaking.
Yeah. No, I like that. And, the thing that amazes me most about the letter to the Philippians is Paul wrote that in prison.
Yeah. He's literally sitting in prison and he's
sitting in a Roman prison.
Yeah. And he's like, I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm satisfied.
I'm satisfied with the physical things that I have. Yeah. And, I'm not at all satisfied with my relationship with God. I have not already obtained this, but I press on.
And he kind of makes it like this exciting thing. Like, I've learned the secret. Yeah. Like, I figured out something pretty awesome.
That great mystery. Yeah. Which is Jesus.
Yeah. So that's all I've got.
All right. Well, you want to close this out?
Yeah, absolutely. Just want to encourage everyone, if you have any questions or comments about today's episode, please reach out to us. Our contact information will be played here in our outro here in a second. So we encourage y'all to reach out, but we also love and welcome the support. So thank y'all very much.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Bible Conversations. We want to ask if you have any questions, suggestions, or comments that you please email us at kcocbibleconversations@gmail.com.
You can also find us on social media. We've got a Facebook page as well as an Instagram account. Our Facebook page is very simple. It's just Bible Conversations. On Instagram, it's very simple, at Bible Conversations. Look us up, like our posts, and share it with your friends.
We also have an opportunity for you to help us financially through a store via Kim's Closet, and you can find that. You can just type into Google Kim's Closet. We have a link as well that we will be posting in each of our episodes, and we just hope that you will reach out and find us and purchase a hoodie or a shirt with the logo on it, and that way you can spread the word without having to say a word. So we appreciate you. Thank you all. Have a blessed week.